Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. We have a presentation with Pacific Empire Minerals. Before we get started, as always, this presentation will contain forward-looking statements. You can find those on the company's presentation on their website, and there will be a Q&A section at the end, so feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to those in the second half of the session. And with that out of the way, I'd like to introduce Brad Peters, CEO, who's going to walk us through the story. Hey, Brad.
Thank you, Deborah. Can you hear me okay there?
Yep, perfect.
Thank you again. Thank you very much. And first, I'll introduce myself. As Deborah mentioned, my name is Brad Peters. I am the president and the CEO of Pacific Empire Minerals Corp. We are a junior explorer. We are listed on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol PEMC and on the OTCQB under the symbol PEMSF. As Deborah mentioned, I will be making forward-looking statements, so please take a note of that. The future is copper. Pacific Empire has been exploring for copper deposits in British Columbia for the last 10 years. We've always believed in copper, and we've maintained our focus throughout that period. I think it's important to note that British Columbia copper miners don't produce copper, they produce copper concentrate. And increasingly going forward, I believe what we're going to see is a premium or dynamic pricing associated with copper, depending on the carbon input required to produce that copper concentrate. BC is in a very fortunate position that we have access to abundant and low-cost, low-carbon hydroelectric power. I really, truly believe that the companies that we are looking to sell our company to, our projects to, are increasingly looking for low-carbon copper projects. And that's something that British Columbia is absolutely blessed with due to our hydroelectric power. In addition, we have proximity to ports, and again, that eliminates transportation and carbon costs associated with transportation. Again, so a lower carbon copper concentrate is something I think that BC is very fortunate to have the potential for. Where are we in the cycle? I've seen a few of these come and go on the shorter sort of scale towards between 2000 and 2020. But it looks like now we're in the initial stages of another upcycle in terms of copper demand, driven by the electrification of the global economy and the decarbonization of that economy. There's just no getting around having copper as the backbone for that electrification and that move towards a greener economy. There's just quite simply no substitute for copper. And I really think we're in a really good spot here now for copper. So what do we do as a company? We at times refer to ourselves as a hybrid generator, but boiling it all down, what we really want to do is identify great projects, improve them, and sell them or monetize them. And we do that by, of course, either staking ground, optioning ground, and we'll carry out low-cost sampling, surveying, and developing drill targets. And what we do with those drill targets can depend on how it fits within the company, whether we seek a partnership or we advance it ourselves. As I mentioned, we have options, if you will, in terms of how we advance a project or what we do with a project. Right now, we have a flagship property. That's our Jean Marie property. That's one we've identified that's suitable for us to advance. That's a project that we have 100% exposure to. In addition, we have partner-funded exploration projects as well, which I will get into. But we have two of those, the Pinnacle and the Kitimat, two projects that are being advanced by partners. And thirdly, and most recently, is royalty generation. We recently announced a transaction whereby we converted our 50% ownership in the Stars property into a 2% royalty on the property, in addition to receiving some cash for that as well. The team. Early this year, we brought on gentleman Thomas Hawkins as our Vice President of Exploration. Thomas has just under 20 years of exploration experience, very familiar with British Columbia. PhD educated, very, very sharp individual, and we're very lucky to have him with us. And more recently, we announced the addition of Ms. Samantha Shorter. Samantha is joining our team as a director and chair of the audit committee as well. And it's really just a nice opportunity for us to bring on a new, fresh voice, and we're very excited to have Ms. Shorter with us as well. Our technical team. Paul Johnson's been with us really almost since inception. As a public company, Paul was with Teck Resources as their senior porphyry geologist for many years. And Paul brings a wealth of experience and knowledge that is really unmatched. We brought on OreQuest consultants last fall as well. OreQuest, again, a tremendous amount of experience here with Douglas and George Cavey. But Jennifer Roskowski is with OreQuest as well. And I met her when she was with First Quantum, a very, very capable geologist. And we just actually came back from another field visit with Jennifer, and we were up at Jean Marie having a look there. And she, again, provided some very valuable input, which I will talk about. Our location. We believe British Columbia has a tremendous advantage in terms of location, power, rail, roads. I've touched on those. I like to say that, you know, all of our projects, or not all of them, but the vast majority of our projects are really within a 2 or 3 hour drive of a Costco. And I think that speaks to when we look at the Quesnel terrain and we look at the operating mines in the Quesnel terrain. There's 6 of them right now, I believe. But the reason for that, is kind of simple. They're just so close to access and infrastructure that developing a mine and operating a mine in central British Columbia in these areas is much less challenging than it can be in certain remote areas. In these areas as well, it tends to be flat, heavily logged in some areas, and then again, that just gives us additional road access and reduces the cost. Now, as I mentioned, we do have a flagship property. This is our Jean Marie property. It's a 12,600 hectare property located basically in central British Columbia. The property is located approximately 50 kilometers to the west of Mount Milligan. It's just to the south of Northwest Copper's Guanica deposit. And again, it's just to the south of our Pinnacle Project that is being advanced through partner-funded exploration. I would like to point out as well on the map here, to get my pointer in there, that this is a rail line in here. So we're just a few kilometers to the east of a rail line. We've got great road access to the property as well. As I mentioned, Mount Milligan's located right here, and then about 3 hour drive to the southeast is the major city of Prince George, British Columbia. Again, proximity to hydroelectric power is critical for us. So the Jean Marie property, this is a property its exploration began at Jean Marie in the early 70s. Stream geochemistry, they found a number of anomalous stream sediment samples, and it was really during the 70s that the bulk of the drilling that took place on this property. What I've done here on this particular map here, you can see there's 3 colors of drill holes. The green holes, these are very shallow holes, roughly 130 meters. The vast majority of the drilling on this property is very, very shallow. And it really wasn't until the 1990s that drilling in this particular area in here and a couple holes here, in 95 and 97, that the drilling did go in excess of 130 meters, with some holes going just to about 300 meters. But generally speaking, on this property, the vast majority of the drilling is very, very shallow. And we're going to look at today our 2 priority target areas. One of them is in this area here, and the second is over just to the south here in this particular area over here. One thing you'll also note is the abundance of roads. Again, this is really a function of logging, and it really gives us a low-cost way to explore the property. Also, because it's relatively covered and there's not a lot of exposure, there are a number of places, certainly along some of these roads in here, where we are fortunate enough to be able to see outcrop, which is absolutely critical for us. Now, as I mentioned, there's been a fair bit of drilling on the property. The vast majority was in the 70s, but and all that drilling too, and we did some shallow drilling last year as well. We did just 13 holes. Most of the drilling has encountered copper over relatively wide areas here. It's really about the grade. And at this point for us, looking to make sure that there is the potential for the grade for an economic ore body. And I'll just point out a couple, areas in here. So the northernmost area up here, again, this is very, very shallow drilling. Nothing really went below 100 meters in this area. And we were in there last year with a number of holes. And really what you see in this area is roughly, 4 by 500 meter zone of roughly 0.2% copper. Not mine grade, but it certainly looks like, looking at this area, that we're close, but still distal to a porphyry center, if in fact that is here. The drilling in this particular area here is, in my opinion, in our opinion, quite significant actually, in that firstly, there's a gap really between these two areas. We're very shallow drilling. But in this particular area here is where we started to see some of the first deeper holes on the project. And I'll draw your attention to 9711. That's 244 meters at 0.32. So respectable grade, certainly respectable grade. And that's copper equivalent. And that includes molybdenum and silver too. There is a fair bit of silver on the property here. But what's, I think, most important is the 27 meters at 1.2% copper. That, it does indicate that we have the potential for grade on this property. But one of the things we noticed when going back to look at the core this year was that, I often refer to it as sometimes as the juicer, or, what's causing that 1.24% over 27 meters. And in these particular areas, we're starting to see hydrothermal breccias and porphyry intrusions. And that's absolutely critical to us. As we look at this particular area, we're starting to see, and certainly direct evidence for porphyry intrusions that would be driving mineralization at this property. And again, a number of holes are outlined here, highlighted for reference, but you can see there's a relatively large area here, several kilometers long, where you're roughly getting anywhere between, let's just say 0.15 to 0.3 to almost 0.4 over a relatively wide area. It does seem to be restricted at this time to this contact for whatever reason, probably structurally controlled or influenced to a certain degree, but that's what historical exploration has indicated to date. As I mentioned, we have 2 drill-ready targets on the property, and both drill targets appear to be up ice from the associated geochemical anomalies. This is the first time I've actually ever done a LiDAR survey, which is a laser, survey that really cuts through the vegetation and brush and allows us to see the actual landforms extraordinarily precisely. And if you look at this particular image we have here, we've got LiDAR in the background, but it's certainly very clear that we're getting these lineations, if you will, across the property, all over the place, actually. But most importantly, directly in the area where we see the geochemical anomalies. And that was something we keyed into earlier when we started looking at the project again this year, was, where is the source of these geochemical anomalies? Quite simply, because we looked at drilling in this particular area when it was drilled, and it's not in the area where it was drilled. So that LiDAR survey, since that's been completed, has been extremely helpful for us. The target area number 1, this is where we are seeing the hydrothermal breccias, the mineralized porphyry intrusions, very good signs, direct evidence in that particular area. And this is a target that's open at depth. Target number 2, this is still a conceptual target to a certain degree. It has the most significant geochemical anomaly in terms of scale and tenure on the property. And but most of this drilling here, except for one hole here, which I'll talk about, was relatively insignificant for the most part. So what do we think we're looking at here target area number 1. Really, one of the first things we did this year was look at the historical drill core we had on the property. We hadn't done this yet, so we brought out as much as we could. We relogged it, and then on a number of occasions, we've gone back to that core to have a look to see if we can start to correlate and to understand what is actually going on on the property, and very specifically on this target area, which is our highest priority target. Review of that drill core we knew there was hydrothermal breccias on the property, and those are wonderful things to have when you're looking for a porphyry, because they're basically conveyor belts and they tell you what's going on below the breccias. But most importantly, I really truly believe that if you're looking for a porphyry deposit, you should be looking for porphyry intrusions, and ideally mineralized porphyry intrusions. And we were able to do that this year, identify 2 distinct phases of porphyry intrusions within the drill core and directly associated with mineralization. And that was really from hole number 2 holes in particular at that. This hole here, which is 9711, this is that 27-meter interval in there, over 1% copper, and that's directly associated with mineralized porphyry intrusions. Not easy to recognize. There's no doubt at first, but once you key your eye in on them, they're pretty darn clear, actually. And certainly that was a source of great joy for me, because as I mentioned, if I'm looking for a porphyry deposit, I'd like to see porphyry intrusions rather than just copper mineralization. That tells me that there's potential for scale and grade on the property as well. Another thing that we're seeing in this particular target area and along this road in this particular area is an increase in terms of alteration. We're looking at propylitic in this particular area, skarn in this particular area, strong silicification again in this particular area. But what we're seeing is an increase in the chalcopyrite to pyrite sulfide ratio. Very important again for us. These are all things we did this year. We're really looking at the rocks and looking at, I guess, lines of direct evidence rather than, sometimes they need geophysics, and geophysics is important, make no mistake. But I think what we're seeing in the rock this year has been absolutely critical to us. So when we look at this diagram, this cross section, this is really, I think, what we're looking at in this particular area is you've got this shallow drilling that is, the grades are consistent, and what we see in the core, the alteration is consistent with the margins of the porphyry system. And our primary target is basically in this particular area right here, highest priority target. But this area in general, it's a wide area of roughly 0.2 copper. And it looks like, because we're getting the breccias and the porphyries in this particular hole in this area here, that somewhere below here is a larger porphyry intrusion that would potentially give us more scale and grade, which is what we're looking for an economic deposit. On target number 2, as I mentioned, this is a bit more conceptual, but hard to ignore based on the scale and tenor of the geochemical anomaly. And as I mentioned, we did that LIDAR survey, which really shows the direction of ice flow is moving from west to east in this direction. And we hypothesized that the geochemical anomaly is being transported from west to east. So just like this diagram below, this is pretty standard diagram in terms of, people have seen this with kimberlites, they've seen it with gold in Ontario. And this is generally what can happen when a glacier transports your geochemical anomaly. Interestingly enough, as I mentioned in the drilling, they drilled the heart of this in 1970s with RC and really didn't get much. However, in these holes here, and specifically in this hole right here, the 94 meters at 0.12. So it certainly looks like in the drilling, as you move from east to west, you're getting much closer to a more strongly mineralized environment. So that's target number 2 on Jean Marie. Oops, I think I skipped. I'll move on to our partner-funded projects and give you just some examples of, partner funding and our royalty generation that we've been working on lately. On the Pinnacle, is a project we've had for some time. And this is an example of a project where we have partner-funded exploration. The other project we have with partner-funded exploration is the Kitimat property. But in the case of the Pinnacle, this is a property where 1111 Exploration Corp optioned the property from us last year. And it's a great example of the kind of deal we like on a property. Again, these are very, very technical and experienced explorers, and we're very happy to have them working on the property. But in this particular case, Pacific Empire retains a 30% retained interest to pre-feasibility. We get 3.5 million shares of 1111 and $375,000 in cash. But most importantly, to get to that 70%, they need to spend $5.7 million, which is a fair bit of money. And we're very happy to see deals structured like that in terms of partner funding on a project like Pinnacle. Pinnacle's just to the north of Jean Marie, just to the south of Quantica, again, in a very, very, I would say, it's in a fantastic location with roads, access, power, and rail nearby. Pinnacle's had $2 million or just over $2 million in partner funded exploration. I won't go into all the details, but generally speaking, there's 24 drill holes on the property, 18 of which have been completed since 2015 through partner funded exploration by various partners that we've had on that property. Currently, drill targets are being developed, and we expect drill testing to come about in 2022. The Stars is an example of a recent royalty transaction whereby we had a 50% interest in the Stars property. We paid $15,000 for that in 2017. Since that time, M3 Metals, formerly ML Gold, they completed a pretty significant drill program on the property under option from us. And that resulted in 405 meters at 0.2 and 204.45 copper, very attractive grades. But the option agreement they had did terminate, so it went back to 50-50. And we felt in this position, we were very comfortable taking $350,000 in cash and being granted a 2% royalty on the property. The Copper King, this is an example. We have a number of pipeline projects, but this is just an example of a pipeline project we have and what we're looking at in our pipeline projects. Again, access, infrastructure, location, common themes for us. This is just to the south of the PEMSF mine. We state this based on the presence of a regional unconformity. This is an unconformity or a geologic structure that's certainly played an interesting role potentially in the location of deposits such as PEMSF, such as Red Chris, and others in the northwest. It did cross the property. It was mapped regionally by the geologists as this particular feature here. However, our mapping and more local mapping from other operators has indicated it's a little more nuanced than that. And what we see here is a island of these tacrovolcanics within sort of a sea of Hazelton volcanics. And interestingly, this is very similar to exactly what you see at PEMSF South, except the opposite. This is also a property with, some of the copper grades here, the mineralization in soils is kind of off the charts. But generally speaking, our target area is in this valley right here, where we did complete an RC drill program in 2018. We did encounter, these two holes didn't get much, but these two certainly did. And, 64 meters at, I guess, 0.17 copper top to bottom. It's a pretty good start for us. We'd like to go a little deeper, but an RC drill only goes to about 100 meters. So we'll take that two mineralized holes in our primary target area. Again, an example of pipeline projects that we have within the portfolio. Lastly, I'll just bring up to speed on our capital structure. Currently just under 90 million shares out. We do have a market cap of about $3.6 million and an enterprise value when you take into account debt and cash of $2.48 million. And I think really the point I would drive home here is that based on our peers and based on, I think, what we have demonstrated, what we have in the portfolio that are that is a very solid copper portfolio that our current valuation for the company, it would be considered a great value. And on that note, I thank everyone for listening, and I'm happy to take questions if anyone has them.
So if you could maybe just summarize the catalysts that are scheduled, I guess, for the next 6 to 12 months, and what you think the strategy is going to be going forward into next year.
No, absolutely. Primary catalyst, I'm just going to flip back to the Jean Marie slide. Primary catalyst for us that's under our control is at Jean Marie. That's going to be our focus immediately in 2022. We will be, now that we're just still waiting to receive some of our geochemical data and a little bit of geophysical data. But I think generally speaking at this point, we are laser focused on these two target areas here. And I think catalysts would be looking at diamond drilling. Absolutely. These are very, very close to being ready for diamond drilling, and diamond drilling in 2022 on these two particular targets, target area number 1 and target area number 2. In addition to that, I do expect or anticipate or hope, I should be cautious, I suppose, but that our Pinnacle property, which is just to the north of Jean Marie, as I mentioned, under option to 1111 Acquisition Corp. I know they're in the process of developing drill targets, and if we could have both of those projects, I think, being explored through diamond drilling next year, that would be fantastic, and those would be the type of catalysts we're looking for.
Hi, Brad. Sorry about that. My computer had some technical issues and shut down for a minute. But I'm back, so I apologize. And I do have some questions while we're waiting for audience questions to come in. So I guess I wanted to just talk to you about your business model. I think we talked in the past that you really have 3 streams of potential revenue. Can you talk about that a little bit more for the audience?
Absolutely. I'll just go to that slide for reference. Previously, I'll just back up a little bit and give some context, because over the last 3 years, I mean, during a bear market, actually over the last 9 years, it's been a rough market for copper and, metals in general. But then one of the things we did from 2018 through 2020 was we used our in-house reverse circulation drill to really drill and kill, and that's just the reality of it, a large number of projects. And I think now that we've come out of that bear market, I think we really are in the early stages of a copper bull market. So we're adjusting our model just a little bit. We've also had years now, 9 years, to weed out sort of the projects that just aren't going to cut it. And what we're left with are projects like Pinnacle, Kitimat, Copper King, World Stock, Moffat, our Nub property. So we've got a portfolio now that we're happy with, that's been developed over the last 3 to 8 years. But in this particular market now, I think we're more comfortable taking on our self-funded projects. For example, our flagship property, Jean Marie. So this really now gives us that exposure for ourselves as a company and for shareholders to a 100% play on a project where we do have that upside. But in addition to that, we also retain the ability to have projects advance simultaneously through partner funding. Now, we don't retain 100% interest in those properties that our partners are exploring, but in the case certainly of Pinnacle, and this is a deal structure that we do like, retaining 30% of that without having to allocate any capital towards advancing that property. That's something that we are certainly very, very comfortable with. And then the royalty generation stream. This is new for us. This was an opportunity on a project that had reverted back to a 50-50 ownership. And we felt that in the current market environment, if you will, that if we can generate royalties on projects that we have by selling them, that's something that is attractive to us. We were really not going to advance the Stars project in the near future ourselves. And we felt that by getting it into the hands of a different group, they would advance it. And that our royalty on that project would certainly would have the potential to be worth significant value if they can demonstrate there's something there. So we've changed our business model a tiny bit, and really it's more of a just recognizing the changing dynamics in the market, where it looks like we're in a very supportive market. We're coming into a supportive market for copper, and that's why we will at this point identify a flagship property and advance it ourselves.
And how do you identify the projects? Are you staking the claims yourself? Are you buying them off third parties? Maybe you can talk a little bit about your pipeline.
No, great question. The pipeline. So I guess we started the company now, I guess back in 2013, and the pipeline is constantly, you constantly have to sort of really turn it over and test your projects. You have to be killing projects. There's just no easy way to put that. And through a number of we use a number of strategies to identify these projects, but really there's a certain amount of location that as well. For us, we're very focused on, projects where you can build a mine. I've often heard it said that the only thing more difficult than finding a mine is selling it. And we're very aware of looking for projects in areas that can be developed into mines, because if they can be developed, they can be sold. And that's what we're in the business of doing. Now, how we do that, identify and acquire these projects, whether it's through staking or option agreements, we're open to both. I think we're pretty much open to everything. But we try and, when we look at these projects, identify areas of the province that are potentially underexplored, or where we see opportunities areas that may have been overlooked. One of those is covered areas. Jean Marie's a great example of that, where there's outcrop here and there, and it's spotty, and most of the best exposure we have in terms of rock is through drilling. It's not uncommon in these central areas of British Columbia to have a tremendous amount of cover, and how you go about exploring in those areas can be challenging. We used our RC drill to do that to a large extent over the last 3 years. There's also a little bit of conceptual geology, looking at large scale regional features, geochemistry, stream sediment samples, and then just plain reading assessment reports, reading a lot of reports, digging through tremendous volumes of data, identifying what you like. If it's open ground, you stake it. And if that ground is held by another party, you talk to the other party and try and get an indication of what they're looking for in return. And if that makes sense to you, try and pursue a deal that makes it work.
Makes sense. And you're very much focused on BC. You're not looking at any other provinces?
We're focused on, I've had this question asked before. We always keep an open mind. But we've been focused on British Columbia since inception. And I think we're going to continue to focus on British Columbia in the near and medium term, really for the simple reason that we've spent time here now focused on developing a portfolio of copper projects over a period of nearly 10 years now. And, as timing and luck, I guess, would have it, we're in an environment now, I think, where, as I touched on, dynamic, and Robert Friedland talked about this at Roundup at one of his talks, is that it looks like we could be coming into an environment, certainly, where we start to see dynamic pricing on copper, and that copper concentrate product that is produced will be priced based upon the carbon input. And British Columbia and our abundance of low cost, low carbon hydroelectric power, that's absolutely critical, I think, to for us and for the global economy in terms of looking for, we're going to need copper to fuel this decarbonization and electrification. And how we get that carbon is going to be, I think, extremely important in terms of looking at projects that are viable and those projects that are not viable.
Got it. And then I guess just about the partners that you're choosing to advance some of the projects.
Yep.
Are you willing to disclose some of those? Are you able to disclose some of the partners and maybe kind of how you source them?
I absolutely can. I'll start with the Kitimat project. The gentleman there, we were approached by Cavu Mining. The Kitimat project was a project that was a little bit off the beaten path for us. So that's a project that we were comfortable in optioning out for 100%. It just didn't fall really within our criteria of what was best suited for the company and for what we were able to do to advance the property. So for us, that we get cash and shares for that property, and in return, they have access to earn 100% of that property. The Pinnacle is a little bit of a different story for sure. This is a property really that we started the company on, and the Pinnacle, I think, really represents the type of deal that we like with our sort of core group of projects, which is a significant retained interest. As I mentioned, 30% retained interest in $5.7 million that they have to spend to get to that 70%. But certainly on the Pinnacle property, 1111 Acquisition Corp, you can go to their website. These are all very experienced explorers, and we're very excited to have a strong technical team take on the project. I think as we come into a better market, these are the type of the deals that we would be looking to achieve on some of our projects. But the Pinnacle project is it's a project that we've explored ourselves. We've had Oz Minerals explore it, ML Gold explored it, and then we went out in 2019. We put 4 holes into it, and I guess the story of the Pinnacle and why it's probably best suited for somebody else at this point is just a different perspective. It's a property where, almost all of the drilling to a certain degree has encountered gold mineralization. And you can step out over wide areas on the property and literally drill gold. The first hole, I'll just bring it up here as an example. But here's the Pinnacle property here, and prior to us getting a hold of the project through staking, actually back in 2012, there's really only 4 holes in this particular area and 2 up here. No assays for this, but there was copper gold encountered here. We did some IP surveys with Oz that showed really a large area of anomalous chargeability that sort of, almost the entire, certainly this particular area. But the first hole drilled there in 2015 in the middle of what is literally a swamp. Encountered 100 meters at 1/3 of a gram gold. And what we've seen on that property, that interests me are basically hydrothermal breccias. There's a tremendous amount of fluid all through this particular southern half of the Pinnacle property. But here's an example. Grab that. Yeah, this is Pinnacle here, right? I think you can see it. But this is an example of what we see at Pinnacle, which is pyrite and gold. Haven't found the copper yet. We didn't, and Oz didn't, and I'm hoping that 1111 Acquisition Corp, through a different set of eyes, that's something that they can hopefully have success with, because there's no shortage of gold. There's gold in all these creeks, all through here. I mean, it's not difficult either. You can just you can pan gold out of this creek here. Certainly this creek here is just full of gold, and we're seeing gold in some of the creeks in here, and then gold in drilling. So it's a very large area of gold, which indicates there's a pretty large system there, but we'll have somebody else take a look at it and see if they can't find the copper center.
Interesting. And we've started to see some M&A on the base metals side. Has that impacted you at all? I know there was a merger between Sun Metals and Serengeti close to your property. Did you see an increased interest from other players, or maybe you can talk a little bit about M&A in the province?
Yeah, I think that's certainly, we did notice that. Absolutely, I think that was beneficial for both of those groups. Bringing in a little more heavy lifting and then access to sort of, I guess, the marketing aspect of it as well. I just think that was just a unique, solid combination. For us, what we focus on and pay attention to are potential buyers, if you will. Who's going to write us a check, for example, for our 30% interest in Pinnacle? Who's going to write us a check for Jean Marie if we can demonstrate that there's grade and size here? That's what we focus on. And I think what's interesting is that we've always been talking to the copper explorers. We've had Oz Minerals explore the Pinnacle, for example, and then we do keep in touch with all the copper majors. But I think what we've seen recently is in British Columbia, because our copper deposits have the potential certainly for a fair bit of gold. Mount Milligan, for example, I mean, it's a copper deposit, but there's millions of ounces of gold there. We've seen like Centerra, for example, come in, and Newcrest. I think we're seeing the gold companies now starting to look at British Columbia copper deposits as a source of gold as well. I think that's something that I've certainly noticed in the last number of years. And I think the reason's simple, that the world's largest gold mines are copper mines. And if you're looking for gold, great place to look for gold is copper mines. So I really think that in British Columbia, if you're located in an area with access and infrastructure, that there's no impediments to, physical impediments, like in terms of valleys and rivers that are sensitive. If you're in these locations and you can demonstrate that you've got something, and I think that there's certainly the majors are going to be paying attention.
Understood. Have you been affected, or were you affected much by the fires this summer? And do you see this as potentially being an ongoing issue? And how do you deal with this?
There's always, when I was younger, back in, I guess, the late 80s and the 90s, I was a tree planter, right? There's always been fires up north. It is natural. It does seem like there are more, it certainly seems like there's more fires. But it's always been something that northern communities have lived with and have had to deal with and work around. But yeah, I can say that when I was up there this year, for example, there were a number of fires burning. And even on our most recent trip with Thomas and with Jennifer, driving back from Jean Marie as we were heading towards Prince George, there was still a fire, I guess, in the burns. You could see it, but they're not too distant. It wasn't too far away. You could still see it smoldering. And there were fires burning around Jean Marie and actually on the Pinnacle this year. I could see it. Yeah, it happens. I guess if it's directly on your property, it may have an impact. But generally speaking, up north, as long as the fires aren't threatening anything, it's kind of business as usual. That they were still logging, still moving, back and forth on the resource roads. So unless it's directly on your property, then it's not really too much of a immediate concern for us. It's just something that I guess you get used to working around.
Well, that's it for my questions. I don't see any audience questions. I know you went through Catalyst for Tina when my Wi-Fi cut out, but maybe you could just point to a couple things that we can watch for, and then we can wrap up.
Yeah, I think what's most interesting and what would be interesting certainly to watch for is we'll have the results, the final results of our geophysical data set that we expect here pretty shortly. It does actually surprisingly take time to have that compiled and inverted and do the work on that. In addition, we've just received our soil geochemical results now from the soil sampling program. So I think in the immediate future, within the next couple of weeks, for example, we'll be able to present the full suite of work that we completed here over the course of this year. And that will in turn lead to the solidification or near solidification, if you will, of our drill targets for 2022.
Great. Well, look forward to those results and for hearing what you're going to plan out for next year. And really appreciate you walking us through the story, Brad. Nice to get to know you. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out and I'll get those answered for you. And yeah, thanks for participating. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Deborah. Much appreciated.